gavel
What's
this
up?
to order. Thanks for having me on on my podcast. I guess I was going to say because you reached out to me actually because
I did.
we've been buddies for a while and we've been texting a lot. Just we always text. We have our senior coffee text
Yeah.
days, and we don't have a regular time set. But I feel like we I thought you were about to vape for a second, and I was like, yeah, bro, you get it.
No, it's chapstick. Just chapstick.
But there's you reached out to me and you're like, can we do a podcast? And so I kind of want to let you sort of lead the charge here in terms of what we're talking about, even though it's technically my podcast. I'm curious
Then
here.
it's important to talk about why I said that.
Yes. Well,
It
first
was
of
on
all,
a day.
do you have a bourbon poured?
I don't.
Oh, Mike, cheeses. Even more important
on.
than the Chambray. It's
You drinking bourbon and water? Is that what we're doing?
No, it's an old fashioned. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it was on a day in which you had said to me, you were talking about you wanted to know my opinion on Dana White.
Oh,
Is that right? Is that the right name? Okay. Who runs the WWE?
Yeah, UFC.
No, MMA.
UFC. He's the president
Sorry.
of a Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is the main sort of.
And former fighter, yeah?
No, he's not a former fighter at all.
Okay.
He's never fought a day in his life.
Just in that world.
Not even fought in that world. He's just a promoter.
Just a promoter. Okay.
Yeah.
So like we were talking about that and the fact that this guy had a very public video come out of him on New Year's Eve with his wife in a club where she hits him and he hits her back a few times and smacks her around pretty good. And people were calling for his job and everything like that. And I don't know anything about this world. You follow this stuff religiously and I do not have the ability to watch it, which is very hypocritical of me because I do enjoy like hockey fights and football, when there's a killer hit in football and all that. But there's something about two men in a ring, even boxing, I just don't enjoy that.
But I would even say, sorry, and again, not to correct you, but the UFC is something now that has expanded out to be two women in a ring. Two men in a ring. Like it's kind of like.
I'm really bad lately. I've been really bad at gender inclusive language. Okay.
Well, no, I'm saying that because it didn't used to be the case. It was when I first started watching it was all men, but now it's definitely changed.
So the issue then is he came out really quick and apologized. And should that be enough for the public to be satisfied and drop it and leave it alone and let it be a personal matter? And then the very next day, we learn about these Biden documents, and he comes out and owns up to it right away and says, yeah, we sent them in. My lawyers immediately, when they discovered them, sent them in. Should that be enough? And that was before they had found even more. So the question then is like, how much does an apology mean to the public? And I say it means a whole hell of a lot. But that's just the PR stance, like just to save your career. I'm really like, I think the biggest thing is that I don't think that we should be having a say in this guy's like marriage issues. And I know it's like a big deal for people who follow the sport because this is a guy who's very visible, I assume. But it really should just be between him and his wife. Now, if he came out and said like, oh, I didn't do that, then that's like a completely different issue. Then that says something about like his fitness to maybe run that organization. I don't know. But even then, like, does it matter if someone's unfit to run an organization? Should we care as a supporter of that organization? I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm kind of swirling all over the place here, but what it comes down to is something I said to you is that I made an assumption that people in fighting sports had a higher instance of domestic violence than people who are not in fighting sports. I know that that's true of law enforcement. I've seen the studies where there's just a larger percentage of domestic violence in law enforcement for whatever reason. I think it's important to figure out why that is. I did not look up any figures about fighting sports or anything like that, but I did see that Bryant Gumbel had done a documentary or a special about this very thing.
Hmm.
I did not watch it. I'm not sure where it is, but
I haven't watched it. I
so
guess
it's not. I'm not the
yeah.
first person to say this. Is the point? Like, it's apparently a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, the I would say that the Biden and the Dana White things are two. I mean, they're two unique circumstances that I
Oh,
think
absolutely.
should be sort of parsed out separately. The the Dana White one is one that I'm again. This is like the speaks to this to the nature of the siloed worlds in which we live. Like, as someone who follows. I mean, I remember walking into like movie rental places as a kid, like Blockbuster, when I was 9 years old, and seeing the UFC VHS tape, like UFC 1, but it was on the same rack with the pornos and like
Really?
Faces of Death and like some of those other like the things that were deemed too dangerous for public, because it was like people stomping each other's heads and like kicking each other in the face. And as the sport has developed, rules have been put in place to take away obviously destructive things to the future of someone else fighting, kicking to the face, soccer kicks,
Yeah.
12 to 6 elbows, like things that. So the sport has evolved over time,
And all
except.
that stuff's relative because to me, someone who
Mm,
doesn't watch the sport,
mm,
I'm looking at it the same as that UFC one Faces of
yeah, yeah,
Death
yeah, yeah.
level. Like we were at a restaurant with Ali's parents maybe like a month ago, over
Mm,
the Christmas holiday, and we were eating and UFC was on,
mm,
and there was blood all over one of the fighters and
mm,
all over the mat, and we had to ask them to turn it off because like I was feeling physically ill seeing that. Um,
mm,
I just, especially while I'm eating, it was a sports bar and there were people there, probably there to watch fighting, but that one TV that was right above us where we were,
mm,
could see it. We don't want to see blood and
mm. Yeah.
violence is what we would consider that. I'm sure that you probably don't consider it violence.
No, I mean, I absolutely can. I absolutely do consider it violence. Except to me, like I parse it out in the same way I would parse out like boxing. Like I think if you listen,
Yeah.
there's a Mike Tyson has a great podcast called Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. He's now like he has his own weed line. He does mushrooms. Like Mike, from what I knew of Mike Tyson growing up, domestic abuse,
Sure.
violence, all of the things. When I hear him talk about the fighting world and I hear fighters talk about the fighting world, to me it's absolutely violence, but it's sanctioned. There are rules. Like this isn't Nom Smokey. There are rules. Like there's it's not just a street fight. Like
Well,
there are
yeah, I
so
think so
so
too. But I also think that living in that when that is your world
mhm,
for the majority of your life,
mhm,
your ability to spin into rage is lubricated a little bit more than the average person. To access that power and that rage, it might be a little bit more accessible if you do it for a living. I don't know. This is a theory I'm throwing out there, and I don't know if there's any data to support this or if I'm right or wrong. But it just seems to me that if your job is to beat the crap out of people, then when you get insanely jealous at your wife or it seems like you have been wronged personally, it's that saying that a lot of addicts who are in recoveries have this saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
yeah. And I think you brought that argument up when we were texting, not as flushed out as you just did, but and I think my response back to you was something along the lines of like, for you, Mike, like your skill set is one which includes fooling people
Hmm.
and getting them to believe something that's not true in that very moment so that you can show them later what is the truth, right?
Sure.
Even though you have fooled them the entire time into sort of being distracted and not believing what they actually are seeing.
Yeah. So,
No, but sorry, let me finish.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
The if I were to just play that same scenario, then the likelihood would be then for you, Mike, when you are in a stressful situation, for instance, with with a family member or something, that when it comes to somebody's trying to hold you accountable, or you've done something or they've done something and you feel like you are in a weird position, right? And it's making you uncomfortable. Do you resort to your skill set, which involves fooling people, as a way to get out of that moment?
Yeah. First of all, very skillful of you to say that entire thing without using the word lie or lying. Because
Well, no, because I know you for a long time. I know that's not what you're doing, but
it is what I'm doing. In
but
fact,
there's levels to the game. That's what I'm saying. Like
I have a routine in the show now about this. About it is my job to be a liar, and how does that sit with me? And only reason I bring it up in the context of the show is that it gets me to this point where I can say, so I thought I would do some magic in which I tell you the truth, which, and we talk about the liar's paradox and that whole thing. But I think that it is very easy for magicians as a whole to be manipulative, to gaslight. Really, gaslighting is probably a better term for what we do than lying, because what our job is not to fool you. It's to get you to fool yourself and to convince you that you're wrong about what you just saw. Or to convince you that what you think about what you just saw is wrong. That this coin can't vanish in midair. Well, you're wrong about that because it just did. And when you get someone to fool themselves, that's the real trick of great magic, because that is way more deceptive than if someone else fools you. Because if someone else fools you, then it's on them. But if I say that you fooled yourself, that means that I have exhausted all possible explanations of me doing something, and you are convinced that you just saw something that you didn't think you could see, or whatever. So, yeah. But that's a long way of saying I think a lot of magicians are excellent liars and do let that escape into their world. There are other really important parts of my job that absolutely have leaked into my personal life.
Me too.
The way that I consume media is ruined because of being a performer. And you might feel the same way about listening to music. You probably are much more critical of music than your non-musician friends.
I'm more, I would say, of like the things that and I think because in the music world, my particular tastes have led me to like spoken word and text and storytelling.
Yeah.
I'm really judgmental of storytelling podcasts or anybody who's trying to tell some narrative story, even if there's music involved or not involved. Like that's where my judgment comes in. Music, I mean, I guess I don't like going to live concerts. I guess that's like, I just sit there because like, maybe this is where, like when I'm at a live concert, I look around, I'm like, I know how much that light costs to run.
Yeah.
I know how much
it's the same. Exactly.
I know how much that the person who's showing people to their seats, I know how much she's getting paid. I know how much the stage manager costs. Oh my God, it's not just a light, it's a moving light. That now goes to $7,000 a piece to have those hanging above you as a rent. Like, so now, like, as I'm sitting at like I go to see the National at Beacon Theater, I'm like,
yeah.
Every time those lights go boop boop boop, that's $1,300.
Right.
And I'm like,
I do the same. I have often said to Allison, I would enjoy this concert more if I was sitting at front of house watching the board operator.
I think where I'm not pushing back or sort of asking you to engage in this, but I would say the thing that has given me appreciation for the MMA community is actually listening to a ton of podcasts with fighters, both female and male, and couples who are fighters talking about this stuff, because I think I did have the same sort of predilection of like, maybe this is the vibe of this community, right?
Yeah.
But I think it starts to fall into confirmation bias a little bit. Like when you don't know about, if you grew up in a very democratic household and you hear something about a Trump voter, and then you see a Trump voter and you're like, you know what, that person really fits that, so then they're all that way. It's like, no, sure. You've met one. Like, I think in the MMA community, I think if you sat in my head, I can think of 30 different fighters immediately, one or two of which have had domestic violence issues. The problem I have when these arguments come up is like, oh, it's MMA, it's Dana White, everybody's slapping each other. It's like, yeah, but you're only looking at the couple data points that make it out of the MMA media world. it is incumbent upon us to then look at the other 40 data points to make sure that we're then judging that community. It's like if I met one magician who's a piece of shit, I am not, because I know you're my other data point. I'm not going to assume that all magicians are, and I've taken a few jiu-jitsu classes, and I'm not a practitioner by any means, but I've taken 3. And oh my God, Mike, it is no different. The skill set is no different. The practice, the mentality is no different than me and you sitting in that little cabin at that band camp, and you being like, "Here's this box trick I just bought," and you like fucking it up 3 or 4 times. That's the same as me as a white belt going into a jiu-jitsu class and getting choked out 3 or 4 times.
Sure.
I have to be like, "Oh shit, okay, this is how you do it." No one's in there to hurt you. It's just there's a methodology, and I love the way that martial arts are honest about where you are in life. This is the other thing too that I loved. Like you walk in a room,
explain that. I don't know that I understand what you mean by that.
Everybody's wearing a different colored belt.
Oh, okay.
We're all in the same room, and I'm gonna be grappling with somebody, a black belt, but that black belt sees my white belt and knows that he can't roll me up into a ball and break my back. It's not going to do him any good. It's not going to do me any good. So what he's going to do is he's going to roll with me, and then when he rolls with the blue belt, he's going to roll a little differently. When he rolls with his colleagues in the black belt, but there's this constant intermingling. And so when I see fighting happening at the UFC level, I'm looking at those fighters, 2 guys in a ring or 2 women in a ring, and being like, I know she's a brown belt. I know she's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but she's a black belt in taekwondo, this other girl. So how is that going to match up? How do those skill sets match up? Now, sure, somebody might have blood all over their face by the end and make Mike uncomfortable sitting at his dinner table, but you know what? There are a lot of people who watched the Buffalo Bills the other night and saw a heart attack on the field.
It's for real. Yeah,
for like 8 minutes, they saw him doing CPR. And so,
I was talking about how much I like these hits and stuff, and we were watching Yellowstone when that happened. And Allie's mom texted us and said, "Turn on the Bills game." And at that point, I already knew. I had just read what was going on Twitter, because I do like 3 things at once. So I'm watching Yellowstone. I'm looking at Twitter, and I had told Allie, I was like, some guy just like collapsed and they're doing CPR on him. And she's like, "Do you want to turn it on?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to watch someone die on TV.
Yeah. I don't want to watch somebody potentially." It's like, sorry, go ahead.
So, well, I was just going to say, as much as I said earlier, I like hockey fights and I like these hits, there's a moment that it becomes real and then it becomes past what the sport is, that I am not interested in the smut of like gore porn or whatever it would be considered, like where you're gawking at a train wreck, I understand the human condition of wanting to see that stuff. I totally get that. And I think that's a large part of why the fighting sports are so popular, is because there is something innate in us that loves loves fighting, that loves conflict, and that loves watching people beat each other up. I think that that's what basically that's why World Star became famous.
I would Mike, I love having conversations with you because I can push back against you, and I know that you're my buddy. Like, we're still in that cabin at that band camp, Whitehall band camp, Whitehall for life. I think it is possibly harmful. Sorry, it's treacherous to sort of compare again, like the motivations for why people watch stuff. It's like, why would somebody come watch a magic show? Because
there are a million reasons.
There's
sure, absolutely.
Like, I love the Schadenfreude of watching somebody get their watch stolen off their wrist. Like that's shitty. That's terrible. That I want to see that.
Well, but and along this, I think I see where you're going with this, and I got to say, I personally do not enjoy hypnosis shows, hypnotists, because of that. It feels transgressive to a point that makes me uncomfortable. It's walking. I know that what they're doing is ethical, but it is a blurred line when it comes to consent. When you talk about hypnosis, you got people up there doing very embarrassing things, and that's why it's funny. Because even though they may technically know what they're doing, the audience thinks that they don't. And so the audience thinks they are watching someone do something without their consent. And it makes me very uncomfortable.
I totally understand that. I mean, I think a better comparison between MMA and other internet sort of phenomenon would not be World Star. It would be what's called King of the Streets. And I'm sure you don't know what this is, but it's a fight promotion that's, I think, come out of Russia. where they fight in hockey rinks, they fight in parking garages, they put up a ring, but it's no rules. It's kind of like going back to the original UFC vibe. Like, we're going to put you in this ring. The only thing that's sanctioned is this square footage that you can fight in. And then if you're about to kill somebody, we'll jump in and stop it. But past that, no. So I will say, to feeding the sort of instinct that I have to watch a car wreck, I was like, well, let me see what one of these is like. As someone who has followed the UFC now for 6, 7, 8 years, it was horrifying, Mike. I don't actually enjoy watching what I think I realized, like, I don't enjoy watching people get bloodied up. What I enjoy is watching people work within a rule system tactfully. That's what the NBA does. For lack of, I mean, not that the NFL is perfect, but there's a rule system in place. You cannot run at somebody with your head as your leading, instrument of your weapon of choice, right? We have developed these rules. And so to watch teams function within that rule system, and in football, it's gotten all the way down to like how much pressure is in the football. We're arguing about that. UFC is not they're 100 years behind that particular set of rule systems, but to see fighters now sort of navigate within the sort of, and I know what the rules are, and when you can see a fighter approach that line and you're just like, what's going to happen? How are they going to get around this? To me, that's the interesting thing.
This is all really interesting, but I feel like we've gotten really far.
We have. We're now arguing about this MMA versus,
and it's fine. It's fine, and I'm never going to fault someone for enjoying those sports. I know how popular they are. Mm-hmm. It's a personal thing with me that I don't enjoy them.
Well, let me ask this then of you, because I think as it pertains to your first point with Dana White, and to me, the thing that has been confusing, frustrating, is that if it was LeBron James, I'm sorry, he'd be out of the NFL or the NBA.
Yeah, you're right.
No questions asked. If he was on a video slapping his wife in Cabo,
well, there was the guy a couple years ago in an elevator with then the footage came out. Was that football or basketball player? I don't remember. There was a professional sports player guy whose wife said that she beat him up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I really shouldn't be talking about this without knowing the facts, but I do remember watching the video. It was everywhere, and he was beating the crap out of her in an elevator. And I feel like maybe he even like dragged her by her hair or something.
I think I know what you're talking about. And I'm not going to comment on it because I don't know all the circumstances. Yeah. But to me, I think in the era, if we step back from the idea that like I think I personally don't believe that public apologies actually placate much. I mean, I think there's a few people who are like, I feel better. But I think by and large, most folks, it's a compliance thing. Like, they just want to feel like somebody bowed to their demand, right?
Sure.
But I think that's also in the context of how popular a sport is, how much money a sport generates. I think the recent Dana White stuff, it's like, oh my God. I think as someone who's followed the UFC for a second, they're on ESPN, so I just assume there would be this massive backlash on ESPN. It's like, maybe the UFC isn't big enough that people care. You had no idea when I texted you. But this is like,
no, I didn't know who this is. Yeah.
This is as if LeBron James had slapped his wife, to me.
Sure.
Because I know of Dana White. He's in the social media world I follow because I follow fighters. Like, so to me, I was just like, oh my God, if it only matters if you're making money when you do something shitty, then what is the actual, like, what's the litmus test for an apology?
So there was a very prominent husband and wife magician team. And about 15 years ago, they were like, within magicians, everyone knew who this couple was. Mm-hmm. And 15 years ago, like, one of them shot the other one. They're both alive.
Oh my God.
I want to say she shot him in the abdomen with an arrow, with like a bow and arrow.
Can I just say that no one in the MMA community has shot anybody with an arrow
and
that I know of,
and no one knows about this.
Yeah,
because it's magicians. Mm-hmm. These are people who have been on TV, national TV, multiple times throughout their career. They both still have careers, separate careers now, but they both still have careers. By the way, we were talking about Ray Rice in the NFL. in the
Okay.
elevator. And this article that I just found, it says that it did end his NFL career in an instant. This thing,
Right.
NFL very public. He was on the Ravens, I believe, and you know that type of thing. You can't do because there's so many more eyes. If someone on the U.S. women's soccer team did that, probably not as many people are going to care, right?
I mean,
Or the WNBA.
what's crazy to me about all of it is the sort of like uneven nature by which, like, I think it just shows that society itself isn't really equipped to handle this stuff with a sort of unified approach. You know, like you know, we
I
because
constantly-
not everybody's involved in it. Like I'm just sitting here being like, I cannot believe that Dana White got away with this. Like, I agree with you that it is a personal issue with him and his wife, but you do not. I'm married to someone who has been in abusive relationships of various. I mean, there's a spectrum there, so it's not like,
Yeah.
you know, but you don't do that. I don't give
No.
a fuck who you are, and you don't get to do that in public, especially as a man. I think if
Now wait, stop.
what
I don't agree with the especially as a man.
I don't think you get to hit someone who is bigger than, or I don't. I think as a, I will say for me as a man, like I have the physical capability to pummel most people around me on a daily basis. And
So-
if a woman strikes me, I think I have an obligation to sit for 2 seconds and realize the consequences of me doing the other way
Yeah.
around.
But I feel the same
what
way
I'm
as if like I just don't believe in any of that at all. Like any sort of abuse when it comes to hitting.
No, you don't know. I'm in
I just want to
agreement
make
with
sure
you.
you're not saying there's that it's different if a guy hits a girl than it is if a girl hits a guy. I don't think it's different. Physically, maybe there's a difference in what the outcome will be in terms of injury.
I don't
or,
think
or
there's
something
maybe.
like that.
I think there's absolutely a difference that would come from. I think if Stephanie hauled off and slapped me, and then I just was like, "All right, my turn." I hauled off and slapped her. I think the consequences are way different.
The
Potentially.
consequences might be different, but I don't think the action is different. I don't think either one of those is more wrong than the other. I think they're both wrong.
Well, I don't. I understand what you're saying. I don't completely disagree. I'm not an advocate of violence at all. I
Okay,
don't think
so
anybody
put it
should be
this way.
hitting anybody. But I think
If-
when the shit hits the fan, you as a human being, like, you know, you have an obligation when if someone, you can't just do eye for an eye. I'm sorry, like that's a like we have to figure out a more evolved way to deal with this. So I mean,
More evolved.
there's the example. I think it's Jay-Z that gets like pummeled in an elevator by Beyonce's sister or something.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
takes it. And I'm sitting there thinking, me like, man, I totally get it. Someone's physically assaulting you in an elevator, but
You can't do anything. Yeah.
not that you can't. It's just that like you don't. It's not a fair fight. And this I think goes back to MMA a little bit, where like there are clear like that MMA has been sanctioned in such a way. And the way the weight classes, like there are not men and women fighting each other, and for good reason. And you can have all the arguments about trans fighters and men and women have equal whatever. There's goddamn good reason Floyd Mayweather is not in a ring with some woman equal his size. I'm
So
sorry.
Let me
you know,
let
like
me pose this to you though. Let me pose.
so
this
in
to
real life, I think we do have to sort of think about like there's a reason that when I get slapped by Stephanie, I'm gonna go boop. But when I just even give the same force back, like there's physics, and I have a hard time with the
you.
sort of.
Well, I first want to say I hope Stephanie's not slapping you.
No, definitely not.
Second,
Probably should, but you know,
What's Dana White's wife's name?
I don't actually know.
Okay, so what if she was the head of the UFC, and we just knew him as her husband, and we saw that same video come out, and it stopped after she hit him first, so she slapped him, and that's all we saw. The public would get that, and they would say, "Oh, he must have said something stupid to her to deserve that." It wouldn't have been seen as domestic violence by the public. But in my opinion, that's just as wrong. Just equally as wrong. No matter, not taking into account how much, because he didn't punch her, he slapped her the same way she slapped him.
And then
Now
kicked her. As
he's a
far as I
bigger
know.
dude, so he made her move. I mean, he physically moved her head when he hit it. But I'm just saying, like, I think that we have these different standards for men and women when it comes to fighting in like domestic abuse, and I don't think that those are necessarily only tied to the physical outcome. I think it has a lot more to do with gender roles and how people see what a woman is allowed to do to her man versus how what a man's allowed to do to his woman. I think that that's like
Hmm.
the way that the public historically looks at these types of fights, and no one would have had trouble if the video came out with just her hitting him.
I don't. Well, I yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't have that
Even if
video.
she was the person that had all this power. Now, that's another thing. Now that I know from you that
Hmm.
this guy does not have a history being a fighter, and his only exposure to it is sort of living in the world around fighters and people
He's a
and dealing
big
with
dude. He
fighters.
trains. Don't get
And
me
he's
wrong.
huge.
Like,
He
but yeah,
looks
he's not.
like he could have
He
been a
looks
fighter.
like a fighter, but I think if you talk to fighters, they're all like Dana hasn't fought his day in his life. Like
Yeah. Uh, I think that there's also an aspect here that has to do with power.
Mhm.
And you see it in so many places. You see it in churches and in businesses and everywhere where the person with the most power abuses the hell out of that power because, and that's another thing, just like the job, that I think can leak from the job to the personal life.
Hmm.
Where if you all day long, every day of the week, are ordering people to do what you want, and if they don't do what you want, there are going to be consequences. I think there's some of that leaks into your personal life, and it's difficult to have a relationship in which you don't view others as subordinates of you.
I don't completely disagree with that. Only because like as someone who runs a business with three other guys and we have employees and we're trying to figure out how to do that, like there are traps you can fall into where when you have two or three people who are answering to you,
Yeah.
you get used to that. But I think an evolved, mature human being over time, as a 43-year-old man, I have worked really hard to sort of be able to compartmentalize those two versions of me so that when I come home, I'm not just ordering Stephanie around like my interns, or something,
Yeah.
or my executive director or operations director. Like there are levels to the game. And like, and I think with Dana, the other thing that I think is, again, is troubling with how this whole thing is played out. And I think for me, and I feel like the minute you say you're like, no, I'm not being racist, but like I'm not defending Dana here, but like the unique difference here that I haven't seen in like Trump's case or Biden's case, even though Biden came out the next day and sort of said like it was my Corvette and it was a locked garage. Like there's all those.
He didn't come out and say, "Listen, I'm sorry." He said, we did what we were supposed to do."
Right. And I think having gone through the last 4 or 5 years of people just waffling on all this stuff and not actually saying anything outright, and then there's like we were texting about the Steve Reich stuff that happened over the summer post George Floyd, like the sort of demand for an apology, and it's like I can see a nuance there where maybe it can be different, but like Dana White, literally the next day came out and said, "I fucked up. Do not defend me. If I hear you defending me, I won't agree with you. Like my plight now is to carry this as a human being that I'm that guy." Now, I don't know if that's the appropriate punishment, but no one ever says that. Bill Cosby never said that. Like Bill Clinton never said that. No one ever. Trump never
think
said
about
that.
Like, okay,
that's a crazy thing for someone to say in 2023. Like,
like like the Cosby Show is still on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cosby Show reruns are still on, and I'm conflicted about watching them because there's certainly like the nostalgic value, and it was great television.
Mm-hmm.
But the same thing goes for what's his name, Chris Brown. His music is still being listened to by millions of people. He never came out and owned up to being, a violent against his girlfriend. Like, people still play "I Believe I Can Fly."
Michael Jackson.
By R. Kelly. So Michael Jackson, I'm going to take a little bit of a different stance on because I don't These are, let's just keep it to people who we have definite proof that they were, because I still am
Well,
not 100% convinced that Michael Jackson was a pedophile.
well, let me ask you this, because I think this is the thing that I've been trying to ask myself for the last couple of years, and I think the Steve Reich thing was one that really hit home for me in a way that I was like, I thought I was going to have a better answer after that, of like, oh, this is how you do it, because I know this person. What does, in your mind, is there a way to be publicly culpable for something
Yeah.
that checks all the boxes? Like, what is the, or
Okay.
is that not possible, and we should get used to, as a society, apologizing, and the apologizer just knowing that it's never going to serve everybody, and then that's the end of it? What that means, though, is that we as a society need to understand that apologies aren't going to serve everybody, and we need to be okay with that. Or what I have been perceiving is this third option, which is we keep demanding apologies until we get tired and the next travesty happens.
Yeah.
I feel like that the third bucket is where we basically live in.
That's where we are. That's where we are.
And that's not sustainable, at least to me.
No.
I'm going to hop off the train. That's why I was like, I'm not going to post about Dana White. Why?
Yeah.
Because I know in a week, something shitty else is going to happen.
Well, that brings me to another
point.
point that I want to get to in a minute. But briefly,
Yeah.
I think that apologies are a one-way thing from the transgressor, and forgiveness is a one-way thing from the person who has been transgressed against. So when you apologize, you cannot expect anything. It's like giving a gift. We don't give gifts with the intention of receiving one back. Like, it's something that you give from your heart, and then if that relationship is there, it's on, the onus is on them then. So like, you cannot ever expect forgiveness for anything. And we're also sort of treating the world that's, the social media world, as this monolith. There are going to be people that are never going to be satisfied by this apology. Mm-hmm. But I think the way to get past it starts on day one with that apology. And then day two is when the rage ends for some people and they're able to see clearly. And then for people who, I think it would be amazing for him to volunteer at a battered woman's shelter. Now, would that be pandering and optics? Yes. But that's also this is PR that we're talking about, right? The relationship between him and his wife has nothing to do with any of this. That's just those
You're
two
talking about Dana here, not Steve
Yes.
Reich. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right.
I'm talking about Dana.
Yeah.
Now, the thing with Steve Reich was like, was it stuff that he had written a long time ago that was anti-Semitic?
Somebody
racist
alleged that he said at a party in 1971 that he had said something off color about the black community in New York.
And then what did he do as a result of that being made public?
It was, I don't exactly remember the exact date, but there was, one of the guys, and so was in correspondence with him a lot. I think he ended up putting out a statement saying, I don't remember saying this, but if I did, I'm sorry that it caused any sort of. So I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm not getting exact wording.
See,
but
I think that it's an empty thing to to make that word without acknowledging that if I did, it's because back then I felt this way or I thought this way. That's a huge part of this apology, right? Like,
but it's the part of that to me. I'm questioning the premise of the apology. Like, the foundation upon which the apology is being demanded is an alleged quote from 1970 at a cocktail party. It's not even like he was on a radio show saying this stuff. Like,
it's a different situation than like Ralph Northam showing up with, where there are photos of
right.
Or Justin Trudeau, having photos of him in blackface. Like,
some of the conversations that I was really frustrated by, and there's a website called Drumming at 50, 50, that So put out pretty much right after like the fall of George Floyd, like the fall following George Floyd's murder, and to me the issue was we're gonna demand an apology about something from some man who was saying something in the context of 1970 politics. Like, you do not have the knowledge of what comes in the next 50 years. And to then, as 50 years later, look at somebody and not also address the politics of what it meant to be a Jew in New York in 1969, 1970, what it meant between those two minority communities in New York, fighting for during civil rights. Like, there's a lot of nuance there to sort of dig down. And I'm not advocating for what Steve said. If I was in the room with Steve in 1970, I'd be like, hey, bud, he's a nice guy. Why'd you say that? But in 1970, people also said the term blacks pretty regularly.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't, again, like, I just feel like what my fear is that while we're all living in this haze of righteous, indignation about the way people in the past are living, it's like, all right, let's fast forward to 2073, where they're looking at this podcast with Josh Quillen and Mike Kent.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden now Josh Quillen at 85 has to go on some large social media mea culpa tour because
what if,
of the way we were talking.
You're wearing a white ball cap, and what if, in 30 years, to wear a white ball cap means that you are a neo-Nazi?
What I'm wearing is a Cleveland ball cap, a Cleveland Indians ball cap, purposely wearing the C because I don't agree with the Chief Wahoo thing, but I grew up on the Cleveland Indians. So like there's a part of me as a child that I'm like, I want to support my local thing, but also I don't want to support that local thing. So I'm going to support this thing, but then somebody else can see this thing as still that other thing.
But talking about that nuance, like if there's a photo of you wearing a t-shirt when you were 10 of Chief Wahoo, like you're not going to get canceled for that because people understand the context within which that was worn.
I don't know. I mean, I think the Steve thing was the Steve thing for me was where I was very skeptical of people's ability to apply context. It's like, this is a man's music who I've played for 17 years of my life, and he's been in concerts. People have stood up for him, standing ovation. He comes to master classes, and all of a sudden, a quote of like 8 words from 1970 comes out, and he's a pariah.
Sure.
And it's like, man, if that can happen to Steve, it can happen to me. It can happen to you, Mike. And this is where I think the sort of scarlet letter nature of this whole like cancel culture, and it's been really frustrating for the last 4 or 5 years to have people be like, cancel culture doesn't exist, you're just afraid. It's like, yes, I'm afraid because cancel culture exists. Like this idea that
this is one of those things that you and I argue about a lot, because I can't really think of anyone who, I mean, what's an example of someone who's legitimately lost all of their income, and you know what I mean? Like,
I wouldn't say all, but I would say Steve. I would say, and again, like, but again, like, this is the, like, it's not just ageism, it's wealthism. It's like people look at Steve and they're like, oh, well, he's got a career, so fuck him. Why does anybody care? It's like, what? Wait a minute. That's how we're going to look at people? Like,
yeah.
Like, I'm sorry. That's just a really reductive, terrible way to view people. Like, I'm only going to work with somebody
I think that we have to be careful about the evidence that we're using when we start talking about. I hate the word cancel. I just think it's stupid because, like, what are you canceling? Like, nothing's actually being canceled. If you're losing work, then there's a reason for that. If, that reason is one thing that supposedly you said, that's not right. I mean, I think we need to be very careful and look at things in context. And, no one canceled Bill Cosby because of like one thing that someone said. It was once, first of all, oh God, what's his name that started it with his comedy, Hannibal Buress.
Yeah, Hannibal Buress. Yeah.
And it was a known thing in the comedy community, but he happened to say it on stage and the video went viral. And that's what really launched this to all these women felt comfortable speaking out, was because once they heard it happen to someone else, right? And then once it becomes multiple and multiple and multiple, right? No one is going to find that Ralph Northam blackface picture if he's not a celebrity politician who's making policies that hurt people. Same thing with Justin Trudeau. They're making enemies who are looking for stuff to hurt them with, right? So like when you're in that position, I don't know what you do. Like, that's, you always hear people say, I've got too many skeletons in my closet to go into politics. That's been a thing for decades. That's not a new thing.
I'm going to try to pull something up here if I can do it.
Sure.
I want to show you a picture that I've been very hesitant to show pretty much anyone, but it's and I have not posted online. Sorry, it's gonna take me a second to find it, but
Well, while you're looking for that, oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I think I found one good one here. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. This is great. This is gonna be great, Mike. I'm gonna share this, and I'm gonna get canceled immediately. Okay, so this is me at my friend Jerion and Karnika's wedding with my wife Stephanie, who you know well.
Yes, and you're wearing Trinidadian.
What
clothes?
this is, that's an African pattern.
Okay.
Before we went down, I told a friend of mine, Ashley George, I said, Ashley, like I'm going down here, going down to Trinidad. I don't want to look out of place. Like I'm gonna wear the blue chambray with the vest and the Wolverine boots. Like what do I need to do to not look like an idiot in Trinidad? And so she's like, sit tight. She's a designer, and she made this shirt. I sent her a picture of what my wife was wearing, and she made this shirt. Now, I wore it at the wedding. I played at the wedding. And then blew the armpits out and got super embarrassed and went back to the hotel room and changed into my blue chambray shirt. I came back down to the wedding. The amount of shit I got from my Trini friends for changing out of that shirt was bonkers.
Yeah.
And
and your question is,
my question
what if
here
people
is,
here saw a picture of you in that shirt with no context?
if I post that online, my worry, whether or not it's true, but this is my point, the chilling effect of the last 3 or 4 years is I can't post the thing that I'm super proud of because my best friend Jerion got married to his beautiful woman, and I was in, like, me and Stephanie were the only 2 white people in this entire room, and it was amazing. My fear is that I don't have the time to answer to somebody why that's not racist.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, I think is the, like, I think that the crux of what you were asking a little bit, like, what is forgiveness? How do we as a society? It's because society can't forgive, and I think actually in enough therapy that I've gone through is like, human beings have a terrible inability to forgive themselves. You and I have texted about this. Like, you have personal problems. Mm-hmm. There's things that you're personally dealing with, and you're blaming yourself, and you can't figure it out. And the fact that you can't figure it out is proof more that you're an idiot and you shouldn't fucking be doing what you're doing. Like, it's because Mike can't forgive himself in the same way that Josh can't. And so, like, I'm wondering, like, if Josh can't forgive himself, why should Josh expect that society could forgive Josh? Like, we don't have that in us.
That's shame.
As a
that's
fundamental
not forgiveness. Yeah, that's not guilt or anything. So I just had this thought. Mm-hmm. If I saw that photo of you posted on your Facebook, mm-hmm. and the caption that went with the photo is very self-aware, saying, I was scared shitless to share this photo because I would hate for people to think that this is me demonstrating cultural appropriation or insensitivity. Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of heart and feeling and story behind what I'm wearing in this photo. I think if that was the first exposure of someone to that, there would never be a problem. I don't think anyone could take that and run with it in a negative way. Because if they did, the first thing that anyone would point back to is the source, which is you saying, I know what this looks like, but it's not what you think. And I think most of the instances of stuff happening are the sort of not that, you know, like, yeah, I really, this is Dana White saying, I hate what happened. This is on me to fix. Nobody defend this. It's that same thing. I think the way that you come out initially in the very beginning and say, like, for instance, like, I have this photo of me in a serape, in like a Mexican serape, and there's one somewhere where the serape in a sombrero at a Halloween party. Mm-hmm. And I think this was old enough that it was like before anyone ever talked about cultural appropriation, and it's something that I would never, it's the same thing, like I would never put this photo out on the internet without the context of saying, but in my case, it was cultural appropriation. It was making a costume out of someone's culture. And this is a different conversation maybe, but it was just similar to the Steve Reich thing where it's like, it was at a different time, even though it wasn't that long ago. Mm-hmm. It was before people really talked about this. Mm-hmm. And we knew as white people that this type of behavior could be hurtful. I would have never told you. I would never have any idea that would be hurtful.
But that's what I think. I think that's the thing. Like, it's the idea that, like, you knew it was going to be hurtful and you did it anyway. It's like, no, actually, the context of the time was that no one. like the assumption that I would get up in the morning and be like, all right, what hurtful fucking thing can I do today?
Yeah.
Like that's not the way most people work. I think most people do things to get a laugh, to get societal sort of approval, to just fit in. Like you see everybody else doing it, so you're going to do. And again, like I'm not abdicating anybody of their responsibility. What I'm trying to do here is there needs to be responsibility on society in the way that we judge things. I'll bet there was a time in human history where when people were murdered, we just were like, I don't know, you killed somebody, so I guess we're going to cut your head off. Well, yeah, but I was drunk. Isn't that different than the guy who wakes up and is like, I'm going to kill someone today?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so now we have first, second, third degree murder. And we have manslaughter, which is a different sort of category of murder. And then we have involuntary manslaughter and the vehicular homicide. Like we have all these different things now that are able to diagnose and treat the symptoms of our cancer.
And that's evolution. That's like
evolution.
Human evolution and kindness and understanding. And
what I'm shocked by, though, is, I read The Scarlet Letter when I was a junior in high school. Nothing's changed since 1997. And since that book was written, I'll bet before that, I'm still junior high Josh being like, are we really still the Scarlet Letter people?
No, we are.
We
are. And I would say like we've always been. It's not any worse than it ever has been. It's just kind of moves around to different topics.
But that's the problem. Shouldn't it not be just not any worse than it ever was before? Shouldn't it be getting better?
It should. But there's always stigma, and there's always, this is a conversation that's happening in the world of sex workers, I'm sure. One of the most highly stigmatized careers in the world, I'm sure. And will always be that way. So like back to the cultural appropriation thing, in the like 18th century and early 19th century, it was very popular. There were very popular magicians who made their living pretending to be Asian men, to the point where the audience did not know that they were just white guys who were painting their face, squinting their eyes.
A lot of early Native American like westerns and shit, like same deal.
Yeah, a lot of those were like some of those were white guys, but
some of those were Native Americans horribly abused by the film industry. There's
not
a lot
paid
of
or whatever else.
Yeah.
But like, and there's a buddy of mine who does a magic and science course, where he's talking about right now what's cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. But I think once you start where like the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation is me wearing that serape and you wearing that colorful African style shirt. Yours was always a place of appreciation from before when it started. Mine came from a place of ignorance, which is where I think most of these faults happen.
But there's also, yes, I'm agreeing with you. But then there's also the third category, which I think we need to be better at.
Malice.
There's first degree malice here.
Yeah.
And you having first degree ignorance is a different level. I wouldn't say that's malice. I would say that's true ignorance. And that, I think, is absolutely immediately forgivable as long as the next step is teachable. And you are someone who is teachable, and then you're like, oh, okay. Like there's things that I have learned not to. Anya, stay out, sweetie. Sorry, my dog's trying to get in. I have learned not to say that when a black man or woman says something in a public space to say, wow, that was really articulate.
Yeah, right.
You don't say that because there were a person saying things, and that was the thing. It's like, well, we didn't think black people were articulate for hundreds of years. It's like, actually, that's not true at all. Like, there's ways to sort of adjust the way that you operate as you move through time. But I learned that out of ignorance, being around enough folks of a different color and a different culture to be like, oh, that's not what you do.
Yeah, and I learn stuff like that all the time. That is more borderline. Like that one is that's become publicized enough now that.
It's enough of the zeitgeist that folks know.
Yeah, but there are things, there are lots of words and phrases in the English language with racist roots that everyone uses regularly, and I'm constantly questioning whether or not we should be having this discussion about stopping using it. Words like
what?
Grandfathered, cakewalk, These are all words. There's I've heard so many of them, and I always hear new ones that that are in our regular lexicon that no one uses in a racist way anymore. But that because they had racist intent in the beginning, or because they had racist roots, the etymology of that word, it might bring up hurtful feelings for people. And how much should that weigh into whether or not we use these words? That's about race. When it comes to gender, this is where it really affects me and my job all the time, because it is no longer okay for me to use the phrase ladies and gentlemen. That one has gotten, to use your word, into the zeitgeist enough to where it is seen as non-inclusive language.
So what do you say? Do you say folks? Do you say
folks is great. Sometimes if I do say ladies and gentlemen, I say ladies and gentlemen and friends. Like I'll try to fix it in the middle of the sentence. It's never good. It never sounds natural. My favorite thing to say is just friends.
I was going to say,
I'll just call the audience friends.
What's up,
folks
buddies?
is always great, y'all.
Yeah. I just call everybody Bubba, and that gets me through.
Yeah. But these types of things, and like I was recently, I did a run at a theater in Chicago that did not want you to use any gendered language at all. Meaning that when I have someone on stage who very obviously presents as a male, to not use male pronouns. To just, to refer to them by their name or use they, them, or whatever it might be, just because they're wanting to be a very, inclusive and diverse theater. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to.
Well, can I ask you, like, on that front, like, there's, I'm working on a theater project with this playwright. It's just the two of us. Deals with some pretty intense material. And there have been moments where halls have been like, we need to have a trigger warning, or we need to have a certain thing that says what people are going to see. And I always react to it because I think we also have this feeling that everybody is going to be damaged the same way. So we assume that if you say this one word, there's going to be a fire and everybody's going to get 3rd-degree burns. We're going to have to go to the hospital. I'm not saying it's awesome for one person to get 3rd-degree burns, but if one person's offended out of 400 and there's 30 who got a little bit of a sunburn because what they heard was something they weren't used to hearing, maybe it doesn't change their mind, but it allows them to sort of digest other material in a slightly healthier way moving forward and not have that same. It's like the anxiety reaction I have when my finger twitches. It's like I think I immediately have ALS. It's like no. That's not. My brain is not functioning at a higher level. It's a fear reaction, and I would love for concert halls and venues and in places like where you're going to just trust that Mike Kent. Again, to me, it just feels like I'm going to put up this boundary that you have to jump over. Otherwise, you're not successful. Otherwise, you're going to have to backtrack or apologize. And I don't ever want anybody to be uncomfortable around me at all. But I give people a lot of leeway when they're in my space to be themselves.
Yeah.
And what I ask for is that exact same amount of leeway back. Like I'll give you 50% leeway, you give me 50% leeway, and we'll keep negotiating that over the course of our life. That's what you and I have done since I met you in 1998. And now our negotiations are different for various reasons, but I just feel like that giving that space is something that, especially in the social media age, has really withered away. And I just worry, you and I met pre-social media.
Sure.
The only time that you and I could learn about each other was when we were face to fucking face playing paradiddles and learning Ohio, script Ohio and shit,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the best way to get to know people, but
I think okay, so on stage, the audience, if the audience likes you, these things that we're talking about are never a concern. with the audience. It might be a concern with one person who remembers to think about it later and then tell someone, or like, it's not in the context of what's happening. If the audience likes you, that means that they intuited your intent. And that's where all of this starts, is intent. And it's same with these apologies we're talking about. People know if you mean it. You can read a bullshit apology and know that it's bullshit and that it's forced and that their management made them write it, versus something that's heartfelt. People are smarter than we give them credit for a lot of the time. This is not including all the people in my mentions on Twitter today, because those people are not smart.
Well, but I think people are. But again, like if we're gonna give the general public the benefit of the doubt here, then we need to give the transgressor the benefit of the doubt here too as well. Like they're smarter than we think too.
Well, and a lot of it has to do with like what the transgression is, and we need to have a little bit more information before we go nuts. The problem is the quickness of the outrage machine and how fast everything moves.
In the same way that the left, and I think I agree with this, is fighting for like background checks, and it should not be easy to get a gun.
Right.
You should not be able to get super frustrated and go get a gun. You know what else I don't think you should be able to do? Get super frustrated and bring down someone's career.
Yeah,
I think there should be like a 5-day waiting period.
Yeah.
Where you have to garner enough evidence. You don't get to just scream and yell from the mountaintop and have massive institutions pay attention to you. I'm sorry. Like there's a way you have to earn your way to the point where the New York Times is going to listen to you, or where Princeton or NYU or the Magicians Guild of Columbus is going to listen. You don't get to get on Twitter and be like, Mike Kent's a piece of shit, he should never work again, and then have the Magicians Guild be like, you know what? We're afraid of you, so we're going to say yes.
And that's the problem, right? Because like, okay, so one person with 20 Twitter followers tweets something about some guy's career, it's not going to have an impact. One person with 20 million Twitter followers tweets about it, it's absolutely going to have an impact. However, that one guy with 20 Twitter followers, if one of those Twitter followers is that guy with 20 million and he retweets it, or if 300 people with 20 Twitter followers all tweet it within 5 minutes and the company sees that, then they're going to say, oh shit, we need to look at this employee who said this thing on Facebook because it's starting to go viral. And it doesn't matter at that point how qualified these accusers are at all. It is the optics of the situation much more than the truth of the situation. And if what they have to go back to is that post on your Facebook that says, I would hate to be called, culturally inappropriate or whatever it might be, like then that problem doesn't snowball. There's a really great, I wish I knew what it was, but there's a really great TikTok account of a lady who works in public relations, and she's constantly doing videos about how people handle their crisis PR, and saying like, here's why this statement from the CEO about their company's behavior isn't going to work because he doesn't own up, or here's a great example of how someone owned up for their company's mistakes, couple things. By the way, I deleted Twitter from my phone today because I feel manipulated by it.
Did you delete your Southwest app yet?
I did delete the app, but I have the account because I still have points in there that I need to use. But I figured out my game plan. So that's the other thing I was going to bring up with Southwest in a minute. But I used to use all my Southwest points for the last 20 years. I've used them on stuff. So all the nicest stuff in my house was bought with airline points. My TV, my last 3 computers were all bought. And then at a certain point, the Southwest app stopped letting you use points for Apple products. And so at that point, they still had Best Buy gift cards. And so I had to buy my Apple products at Best Buy. And now I figured it out. They still have Staples gift cards. And I want a new iPad.
No, do not buy your iPad through Staples, Mike.
I have 180,000 points, which is like $900
Mike,
in Southwest. And what am I going to use them for? I'm not going to fly Southwest.
Donate it to charity. Donate it to a battered women's shelter, Mike.
Okay. I didn't beat anyone.
No, but Dana White did. I
So
just think like yeah, I know what you're saying. Sorry, go
no,
ahead.
Josh and I have been going back and forth over the last few weeks because Southwest did me dirty and has been doing me dirty for someone who I don't. There's not many places in my life where I really truly feel entitled, but this is one of them. I fly enough and have flown enough over the years that I need to be treated better than what Southwest Airlines was treating me.
And
And so
Mike,
I
can
made
I ask you who told you that?
many people, but you were the most
No,
recent.
me.
Yeah, I to be fair, my friend Eric Diddleman yelled this into my ear a couple years ago, and then I was in San Francisco in November, and my friend Salish was yelling at me about this, but none of them were as persistent as you about this, and you were the most recent.
I have strong feelings in the world, Mike, and there's few things I'll go to the mat for,
And I talked to you the most about it, I think. But
and Delta was one of them.
so yeah, so that's my new journey. But anyway, the whole reason this was brought up was that I think for Southwest's major error over the holidays, where all of their fleet was grounded due to old computers, they have really been trying hard on the PR angle to make it up. I don't think they're winning PR wise, but I think they're appeasing some of their fans that have stayed. They gave 25,000 tier qualifying points to people who got stranded. They actually gifted me with a list, and I wasn't even stranded anywhere after my whole debacle. Too little, too late. But so I think that like that type of PR is reparative and past the fact. And as fast as media is today, you need to be on top of it day one, saying this is not okay.
I think as it pertains to our conversation about like apologies and when they're required. I will say I do have to go here in a second, but I would say like I think I'd be curious knowing the book that you were, or it was the book or podcast you were talking about that talks about different apologies.
Yeah, it's
Corporate
someone I
apologies.
follow on TikTok, and if I find it, I will definitely let
Send
you
it
know.
to me. But I would be curious for you to go and watch Dana's apologies because again, like I'm not defending him. What I'm saying is he's the only person I've seen apologize in the way that he's apologizing. And I'm curious to see how that sort of meshes with what this other person is talking about in the way that companies should do this stuff, because maybe that's the reason this stuff has gone away. The fact
Yeah.
that he came out so
So,
quickly, maybe that's why it's happening, like I don't know, but
who you're going to look for on TikTok? You can search for the hashtag Crisis PR, but the creator's name is Molly B. McPherson,
okay.
and she does just fantastic videos breaking down Crisis PR and different. Oh, she's got one on UFC's Dana White. Let's listen to what she has to say here. Hang on.
To reflect? No, I don't need to reflect.
To write the perfect response to any type of public shaming, you need to own it, and then you need to explain what happened, and then hopefully make some type of promise to change and not do it again. Maybe you've learned something. Did Dana White own up to that physical altercation that everyone saw in a leaked video of him slapping his wife on New Year's Eve? Yes. He owned it all over.
So I think she's lauding him in this video, but
And I don't think I don't think anybody should be lauded for that. What I'm saying is he's doing the thing that everybody's asking.
not
him to do,
lauding
which is,
for but lauding the reaction. Absolutely, like the as apologies go, she's saying he did a great job of it.
I appreciate that he did not deny it. I appreciate that he said he did it. He never once said he didn't hit his wife. He's like, it's right there. I absolutely hit her. Shouldn't have.
Yeah.
You never hit a woman. And I'm the guy that's going to have to live with this for the rest of my life. He's like, I'm a wife beater. And it's like, now that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be, I mean, I don't even know. Like, I think if I hit Stephanie in public, that's assault. Like there's legal ramifications that come from me smacking my wife in public. And I'm not saying those shouldn't happen, but what I'm saying in the context of the social media environment in which I've seen the last 3 or 4 years demanding these apologies, he gave the quickest, the most succinct, the most to the point one I've heard of anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious. Like, it's funny to me.
I'm trying
how-
to think. I'm trying to
how
put
it's-
myself in the mindset of like the angry person on Twitter. Like the angry.
I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of angry women on the UFC roster who are trying to figure out what to say. You know, like,
yeah, like, but
and-
I'm just trying to think, like, how can you still be angry after hearing that apology?
Well, that's, I think for me, is a lot of the sort of hot airness around all this is like, you're demanding somebody wear a scarlet letter, but when they do sew that scarlet letter on and they walk around town and they go to the market and you see them with that letter, you're gonna still point at them and be like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Or
like, well, then what
next
the fuck
time-
is the point of the scarlet letter? Everybody knows. Why are you
Right.
pointing it out again? You know, and like, I think
Yeah,
we
or
as
the
a
next
society-
time something he does something, even if it's not beating his wife, the next time he does anything that makes the news in a negative way, now it's a pattern of behavior
or like,
because you
I guess
remember the
what-
first thing.
I guess my larger question to you, and I don't know that we need to find an answer here, but is like, is there a point, like, what does forgiven look like?
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like for Dana White or Michael Jackson or Bill Cosby or me or you or Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos? Like, what does it look like for someone to have fucked up, own it publicly, and then have the public be like, let's grab coffee?
Yeah.
And then give you a
That's a
chance to
great
fuck
question.
up again. You know, like Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Elon Musk right now, like the self-driving Tesla thing is getting a lot of bad press.
Yeah, it is.
And there's a point at which he can come out and either defend it or he can be like, man, that's fucked up. I totally messed up. But like, let's figure this out. And there's a point at which is we as a society, we figured out automated ovens. We figured out automated refrigerators. We figured out automated everything else. Like, why don't we give Elon the benefit of the doubt here and be like, he hasn't killed like thousands of people. There's like been a 8-car pile up and a couple people died. I'm not saying that that's nothing, but like, let's not call Elon Musk Adolf Hitler here. like
No,
he's not,
I think
this isn't a Holocaust he's perpetrating. Like,
But back to the whole thing about like a pattern of a pattern of behavior is like, okay, it's a clear lie.
right.
They showed this video pretending that the car was driving itself, and it wasn't. And there are other things that Elon has done in the recent history, in the recent past, that have pissed people off. And so no matter whether or not you forgave him for that first thing, like maybe you fully thought you forgave him. Well, as soon as something came up, you might learn that forgiveness you offered maybe wasn't full. Or,
You forgave him for part of this one thing, but you had these other 7 sort of
yeah,
dangling
or you had
participles hanging
forgiveness
there.
with a little asterisk, like I
Right,
forgive
right.
you unless you fuck up again.
And this is something, as someone who's lived with a pastor, lived in churches where the fundamental tenet, I know you're an atheist, but like the fundamental tenet of Lutheran, the specific Lutheran sect of religionism is forgiveness, grace.
Sure.
I'm sorry, you got it. You didn't have to do anything for it. You earned it just by being born. And I'm looking at all that being like, okay, do I see Trump that way? No. That's a reflection on me, maybe. Less. I mean, Trump's going to be Trump. How do I change the way I see Trump? How do I change the way I see Louis C.K. or
Sure.
Elon Musk or Elizabeth Holmes or, you know, you name it.
Right.
Like, how do I, or is that my responsibility? Or there are some cases like Hitler where, like, I'm sorry, you don't get forgiven for anything. Like,
I know
you
we
know.
need to wrap up, but that really brings up something that was pretty important to my life. I for years belonged to a Buddhist sangha here in town, and Shambhala is the name of it. And the leader of Shambhala was found to have done some really nasty stuff in terms of like abusing the roles of the parishioners that were around him, and a lot of stuff that went against the tenets of the religion. And I do not have the capability yet to understand how I can forgive him, to the point where I have not I've not gone back to Shambhala since it came out.
but you said
Now,
though.
Yet it's possible.
That's important. But that's important. I mean, that's key.
It's also like I think that behavior it caused me to look at some other stuff as well. So there's a lot of different moving parts with this. It's a religion in which, or I wouldn't even call it a religion, but it's a belief system that really was just him and his dad, and both of them have been accused of some really heinous stuff. So I look at that and I'm like, is that something that I really want to follow, or am I able to take these things that they taught and still believe them in some other Sangha and some other route of Buddhism? But I haven't been back, and it bothers me, because I would love to get past that, And you know what they did? They didn't take his picture off the wall. They just put a black silk over it, like a black cloth over it.
So that's a solid choice. It's an interesting choice, but it's one that
there's a lot in that, right? Like that's saying a lot.
I mean, I used to do Bikram yoga a lot, and there was the whole thing about Bikram Chowdhury and his whole abuse of women and all that. Absolutely true. On the other hand, Bikram yoga is one of the things that when I do, I don't feel I feel better walking out of Bikram yoga than I do almost anything else in my life, including the concert stage, including smoking weed or having a drink. Like so can two things be true simultaneously? And that to me is the thing that I'm disappointed in humanity is like, yes, Bikram Chowdhury could be a piece of shit. Your dude could be a piece of shit. But the way I treat people when I walk out of Bikram yoga is way better than the way I treat people before I walk in Bikram yoga. You there, Mike? Mike? Mikey? Mike, where'd you go, buddy?
Yeah, sorry, dude.
I was just saying, like, yes, it's true that Bikram Chowdhury did those things. But is it also true that when I walk out of Bikram yoga, I treat people better than I did before I walked into Bikram yoga?
Sure.
And is that do I just need to cut Bikram yoga out of my life because this guy's a piece of shit? Like, that's the thing
it's the same with Noah Levine is a Dharma punks. He's another Buddhist teacher. The same thing, I watched every video he made. I read every book he wrote. I haven't gone back to watching his videos or reading those books since then. It's a similar situation to like what I talked about the Cosby Show. Is the Cosby Show still funny? Is it still good television? Was it still groundbreaking to portray a upper class black family on television? Yes.
Are there still hundreds of people of minority backgrounds that are receiving residuals from you watching that show? Yes.
Yeah.
And so like for you to cancel the Cosby Show means sure, Cosby's not making any money, but you know who else isn't? Like the other like 75 black people who were working on that show, you know.
It's a great point.
And I understand all the arguments, but the problem with me is that all the arguments aren't on the table. Yeah. And they're not all on the table equally to be dealt with in a way that sees the bigger picture. And again, like I'm admitting this in that, like, I personally have the hard time. Like the last 2 weeks I've been in bed with depression because I can't forgive myself for, whatever anxieties I have, So the idea that
I'm throwing up on my phone in 1999.
Yeah, with a bag of Franzi on my shoulder. Like there are things that I can't just expect society to innately be able to do because I can't do them, But it doesn't mean that I don't have those. We shouldn't have those expectations of each other. And while I expect, while moving forward, it's like to go back to the Biden-Trump thing, which is I think maybe where we started. Yeah. It's like I guess I'm not surprised that Biden had secret materials in his office. What I'm bummed about is the level of vitriol that Biden and the administration threw at Trump when that happened. The minute it happened, when Biden happened, it was like everybody's on. I'm like no. Like I don't think Biden's a piece of shit. What if Biden had just come out and be like, yep, it was by my Corvette, totally messed that up, my bad. This had been over.
I don't know.
Maybe. Or it would be over in my head.
But it's also...
if he'd come out and been like, you know what, Merrick Garland, investigate me. Bring it on. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Which is what they did. Which is what, we welcome the investigation. Come out and say that, and that helps a ton. However, you talked about putting everything out on the table. Mm-hmm. Everything needs to be out on the table. it's important to realize how different these two situations were. And the problem is that there's no table. The table is a palm that's constantly moving, which is the Twitter, 200 characters that people are writing, 280, whatever the hell it is. That's not a table. There's no room for us to have a table. There's no room to put out these facts. The people are going to hear a soundbite from Hannity or hear whatever and think that it's the exact same thing. However, it's being treated two different ways. It's not. It's two very different things with the same basis, right? Like, okay, there were documents that they shouldn't have. One's 20, one's 300. One was given as soon as they found it. The other was lied about and said they didn't have it.
One is currently the president. The other isn't the president. Like there are levels to the game again.
There's a lot of different things. And there's no table no one has the patience, the time to hash these out. And a lot of people don't have the want to hash these out because of tribalism. If I already hate you, this was the confirmation bias we talked about earlier. If I already hate you, then I'm not going to argue in your favor. And I'm not going to see the facts in your favor. So that's the problem, though, is that things are not. Maybe we just have the access to too many people that we shouldn't have access to. Maybe we just all need to be able to just be in cabins in Bell Fountain, Ohio.
Well, we also see everybody on Twitter as a potential consumer, which is where institutions get crazy and they're sort of like, NYU or Princeton or wherever. I mean, it doesn't matter. Apple, Google, it doesn't matter. Like institutions see Twitter and they're like, oh my God, we might lose some clicks. We might lose a subscriber. We might, the New York Times is freaking out about, every time they have an op-ed that doesn't jive, they're like, we got to get another op-ed. Like, let's try to keep the people on the hook. And I think the minute institutions start to realize that it's a really surfacey thing they're investing in with social media. And maybe it becomes 10% of their decision-making process rather than 90% of their decision-making process. Then I feel like, again, we can go back to being like institutions are places where there's like a deep foundation that can't really be rattled, for better or worse. I'm not saying all institutions are great, but there is some... I just think it's important that things can't be blown away in one tweet. And right now things can be. And that is not healthy. Even I think let's let horrible organizations form to the point where they can't be blown over by one tweet. Because what that requires is genuine hard work from the rest of us to make sure they don't succeed. And I
think there's a shelf life to this. Like, this won't go on forever.
I hope.
Well, people are going to wake up to this idea that there's more to a situation than what we hear on Twitter, and they're going to I feel like people are going to start demanding to know more.
Are you saying that people might become woke?
Yeah. They might be woke. Woke and cancel are two words that just are like nails on a chalkboard to me.
They just mean, again, like
stop.
People,
you don't means nothing.
People who use woke and cancel for either way are people who only have hammers and see everything as a nail. And I get really,
that's right.
I get really like, I'm trying real hard not to see everything as a potential cancel. But I would also like to see every potential interaction I have on social media as like a potential for a conversation. I'm shocked at how many times I'm like, hey, should we just have a podcast? Yeah. Crickets.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that's fine. But like, let's just say out loud that you don't want to have a face-to-face conversation. You'd rather just text it all. And that's fine. But I'm not going to do that with you. You forced me into it the last 4 or 5 years. Moving forward, I'm not giving you that. I think that's going to be a real hard pill to swallow for a lot of folks in a specific generation who have really thrived on this as their main sort of medicine for dealing with whatever ails them personally. This idea that Steve Reich, if he can just apologize in the right way, that's going to solve the way I see the world. Or if Kanye West can just apologize in the way that we feel like he should, so all the Jews feel better. Like, I think what he said is horrible, but it's like, I don't know. Really? We're looking to Kanye for the salve for humanity? Like I don't, there's nothing he can say. There's nothing anyone can say. Like, just, like.
It's hard work. We all have to just work hard. I think, like, when it comes to Trump, I'm able to chill out about Trump a lot because at a certain point I decided, And whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know. But I decided he was never loved as a kid. He didn't know what love looked like.
Yeah.
And that informs so much of what we see now.
Mhm.
What I
He's not-
have trouble with is I'm not able to do that for his followers.
Hmm.
I can't find that grace.
Isn't that
in-
weird
in
though that
the
you can
people
find
who
you can find it in the source of the pain, but you can't find it in the people who are experiencing that pain? You know,
yeah,
like
it's difficult for me to understand it.
it's like blaming not. It's like accepting the heroin, but not the user.
Yeah,
you know,
and
like
I see a
like-
little bit of it because, like, you and I are from small Ohio towns. We know these people. We know what these people live like, and how that's an echo chamber in and of itself. And I get that, but I just where I get really frustrated is like when I feel people who I feel should know better still fall for stuff. I get
I
real
will say-
frustrated by it. But
what I love about God, this is gonna sound awful. I am envious of Trump's ability to say whatever he wants to say to the other side. There are parts of me like, and I felt like I've been trying to be very diplomatic in the way I talk about the far left or whatever, like in my life, but I completely understand why people love Trump. He's the heel. He's the
Yeah.
he's the Hulk Hogan who's turned to the NWO, and you're
he's
finally
fighting
like,
for them.
I knew it. I knew it. And you're just like, no matter what he does, you're gonna dye his beard black, like all of the things. And it makes total sense because the other side, as far as my experience has gone, the minute you confront them, it becomes just this like fire hose of words and labels and all this other stuff. I'm not saying the right comes at the left in a healthy way at all, but
no, but it is. You're right.
but it's
they
just a
throw
di-
everything against the wall.
the firepower is different, and so both each side's going to react differently. And I'm baffled that the left doesn't see that. I'm like, you don't. I also don't know anybody on the left who likes to be called a bunch of words, and that's the thing that's so funny to me. I'm just like, what if I started calling you all these things? Like, oh, you know, it's like they self-destruct and become one of those fembots on Austin Powers, and they just explode. You know, and it's like,
Read the book if you haven't already. Jonathan Haidt wrote a book called Righteous Minds.
I know Jonathan Haidt, but I'll check that book out.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book, and it chilled me out a ton about politics when I read it. I should probably read it again because I can remember the effect of having read it. And what it does is it talks about the different moral foundations that each side sort of appeals to and why they believe what they believe. And it puts everything into a context that's very understandable and helps you find grace with you know the people that normally piss you off on a daily basis.
Yeah, my
I'll send you a
you
link
know,
to it. It's a great book.
You know, there's the last couple weeks have been, as I mentioned before, I've been in a bit of a depressive mode, and oddly, one of the things that helps me is to like watch World War II documentaries, and it's fascinating for me to look at a society that, for all intents and purposes, self-destructed. You know, Weimar Germany, post World War I, post the Treaty of Versailles, economic collapse. All of these things, and I think we can very quickly look at a society and be like, "Oh, Hitler, you know, anti-Semitism. These people all hated Jews. They wanted the Holocaust, right? The Holocaust started in like the mid 1930s and really wasn't a thing at the beginning.
Right.
What Hitler did at the beginning was put food on people's tables, was put money in people's pockets, was to build the economy back up so a loaf of bread didn't cost 1 billion marks. You know, like this wasn't. Again, I'm not saying he's good. He also had the anti-Semitism wrapped up in that. But this idea that a whole society is like, we hate Jews and we're going to kill them all. It's like, no. That came as part of the package, but he seduced them in this other way. That to me is the thing when I watch people look at Trump and I'm just like, oh my God, the seductive nature here. Like when people are seduced by politicians, that's what freaks me out. Like when people are seduced by Joe Biden or they're seduced by Barack Obama or they're seduced by Trump, it's just like,
I don't see it with Biden.
Just-
You saw it a lot with Obama, but you don't see it much with
Not
Biden.
as much
You don't
with
see that
Biden.
seduction.
Not as much with Biden. You're right there, but it's to me that's the thing when I look at history, where in terms of forgiveness, I want to look at people and not apply the same sort of shame that the Treaty of Versailles applied to Germany post World War One,
Where it's gonna backfire.
so overbearing and backfiring that it really destroys someone's psyche and makes them rebuild from a harmful place. Like I want to look at people who voted for Trump and be like, how can I see me and you?
Sure.
I totally identify with the
This,
idea that wants to just flip the bird to the system and be like, fuck you,
Man, I'm going to write this down and bookmark it for next time we chat, because this brings up a lot about my art. And when I look at the routines that I wrote early in my career, all of them were created from a very negative place out of spite for the industry. But they're also some of my best pieces that I still perform.
Yeah.
Would never have come up with these ideas if there wasn't this really hardcore satirical irreverent attitude toward magic. And we can talk about that evolution at some point, but
Yeah, Mike,
I know you gotta.
No. I just, because Stephanie's going to be making dinner here soon, and I'm going to get in trouble if I don't wrap. But we can have part 2. And Mike, I don't even know if we solved anything or if we even set out to solve anything. And quite frankly, I don't even care. I just like talking to my buddy.
No, if people
And-
listen to this and they nod their head, that's the idea, right?
Yeah, well, also just to hear two people, I genuinely believe that other folks hearing two people talk, unscripted, which is rare still, and also not agree on everything, ask questions of each other, and then be like, no, we'll pick it up next time. Like that's how we evolve. We don't evolve by someone being like, this is what you're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just hope that we keep having these conversations. And I hope people listen to your podcast, because I feel like you have versions of these conversations with a ton of different types of people about various things. And I highly recommend people listen to Mike's podcast. The internet says it's true.
The internet says it's true.
If
Every
you're-
week is a
and-
different weird story from history. Like we just talked about the Weimar Republic and the Wehrmacht a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I did an episode all about how all the Nazis were basically addicted to meth.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say
Pervitin,
all, like
Pervitin.
Pervitin was like
Mm-hmm.
issued in every German soldier's kit.
And specifically
and
for
it
Operation
was
Barbarossa.
pervasive.
For Operation Barbarossa,
so-
like, for Russia, like,
Was that
because
11 days without food or water going through Russia? I mean, they could not have done that without meth.
Nope.
Which was early in the war, but then late in the war, it really screwed some things up, and we talked about that in this.
Yeah,
episode.
it all adds. I mean, Hitler got cocaine eye drops every morning. Like, there's it all adds up at the end of the day. You end up
He
shooting
was
yourself.
on. He got 90 drugs a day, and 12 of them were narcotics.
Yep. And that all, at the end of the day, that usually ends to you leading to shooting yourself in the bunker at the Reich Chancellery.
Oh God, yeah,
So,
unbelievable.
anyway, Mike, this has been a real. I guess we'll end it there. That was a real high note to
Yeah.
end it on. Suicide in the Reich bunker.
Let's just talk about Hitler at the end of the podcast and just leave
Mike.
everyone feeling real good.
Mike, you're one of my best buds. I appreciate your time.
I love you, Josh.
I haven't
Thanks, buddy.
seen you in person in way too long. But you and Allie are always.
We're
invited out.
gonna change that soon. We're gonna come to New York.
This
I
guest
have
bed.
determined it.
This guest bed here. I'll make it when you guys come. This is
As long as there is a nightstand for my CPAP machine, then we are set.
right there, buddy. I got you. Oh man, I'll build a fucking mount for you on the wall. I'll get you hooked up. You'll have CPAP coming from the top, from the sides. It'll be great.
Nice.
Hey
Love
man,
it.
love you. Tell Allie I said hey, and I hope
will.
to see you soon. Okay.
All right, man. Thank you.
All right, see you, buddy. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on, Enzo Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in Pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandre Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at Mango Chow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. MangoChowClothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.